Hello everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Hero Showcase, featuring the magical rogue, the Runeblade. Runeblade is an incredibly high damage melee rogue class that features a magical blade that they imbue with runes to deal some of the highest burst damage in the game. Most of Runeblade's abilities involve applying a rune to your sword, which amplify the effects of your left click attacks. If there's ever something you could want to do to your enemy, a Runeblade could probably have a rune for it. Slows, silences, poisons, fire, anything you can ask for. This makes Runeblade probably one of the best 1v1 classes in the game. Now before we look at the actual abilities, let's look at runes and how they work. Every time a Runeblade casts a rune skill, it applies a rune to their sword. The sword can hold a maximum of 3 runes, and once the rune is applied, it lasts forever until it's applied to an enemy. Applying runes to your sword follows the same 0.5 second global cooldown of any other skill in the game. Applying a rune to your enemy is on a 1 second global cooldown, meaning you can apply a maximum of 2 runes every 3 strikes. And runes are applied to your enemy in the order you applied them, so if you did Toxic, Void, Ice, your enemy will get Toxic, then Void, then Ice. And at level 1 you get Toxic Rune. Toxic Rune applies a Toxic Rune to your sword that deals a small damage over time effect. Now the poison ticks for a long time and it ticks fairly hard, so you'll get a lot of passive kills if someone runs away from you. Up next at level 10 you get Void Rune, and this is a simple one. All it does is silence your opponent for 1.5 seconds. Very useful against casters and rogues, but utterly useless against warriors. At 20 you get Duskblade, very easy skill. Point, click, receive health. The healing isn't great, but the cooldown is short enough to make up for that. At 25 you get one of the best anti-caster defensive skills in the game. This is Devour Magic. You turn this thing on and for the next couple of seconds you'll take 20% less magic damage, and any magic damage you do take is converted into mana. Turn this thing on when you expect to take a lot of magic damage, such as when you get entangled or you see them revving up for a big skill. This is also your in-combat mana restoration. At level 35 you get the Runeblade's only mobility skill, this is Blink. It's identical to the wizard version of the skill, but it has a much shorter range and a slightly shorter cooldown. A blink on the Runeblade is slightly disorienting. Because it travels a specific distance and it's used as a gap closer and it's an instant teleport, it's kind of hard to tell exactly where you're going to land. So practice a lot and get the range down before you start using this in combat. Newer Runeblades will find themselves blinking past your opponent or nowhere close to them because they're not quite used to the range and they time it wrong. So go out there and practice, practice, practice. At 40 you get one of the most popular runes in the game. This is Fire Rune, and all it does is tons of damage. This is how you see Runeblades doing such crazy bursts. They stack fire runes on their sword and the next couple attacks are going to do insane amounts of damage. It's not your best go-to pick against casters because you're not going to land that many hits against them, but against other melee classes this is how you will dominate any fight. 3 fire runes deals tons of damage. Up next at level 50 you get a really cool skill. This is Arcane Transfer. It's a simple concept. Any negative effect you have on yourself, you transfer to your target. The cooldown is pretty long, so you'll probably only cast it once per fight, so make sure you use it on a critical skill, such as an Entangle. The skill is reliant on your knowledge of the enemy. Knowing what they can put on you and what you want to transfer onto them is extremely important. Swapping your fire ticks onto a wizard isn't that useful, swapping an Entangle is. At 55 you get the Runeblade's only CC. This is just a simple slow. This is Ice Rune. Put the rune on your sword, and the next attack will slow your enemy for 35%. Now the slow is great against all classes, and the damage is pretty good, so I'd say it's a pretty go-to rune, useful in any situation. Just don't expect it to stop your enemies in their tracks with its slow. One of the last skills you will get at level 60 is Flicker, and this is a pretty cool skill. It turns you invisible for half a second, makes you visible for 1 second, and this cycle will repeat for 7.5 seconds, flickering you in and out invisibility. It's completely useless against melee classes unless you're really good at juking in a half a second, but against ranged casters it makes you almost intargetable. At level 65 you'll get your final skill. This is Rune Word. It's a pretty simple skill. You put it on your target and they take increased magic damage, further adding to the burst damage of the class. Now let's talk about combos. No, not that kind of combos. Rune combos. Rune combos are the act of starting a fight with 3 runes on your sword to achieve a desired effect. The first and simplest combo we will look at is Toxic Fire Fire. This is a good take all come all combo that does the good sustained damage of Toxic Rune followed by some good burst damage from the 2 fires. It's good against any situation, and it's generally good if you don't know what you're going to be fighting next. Up next is Void Ice Void. Now this one's a little bit more complex. It's extremely good against casters if you know how to pull it off. Now this one requires you to pay attention. Start with Void Ice Void, then after your first left click, instantly apply another Ice Rune. Then after your initial Ice Rune gets applied, instantly apply another Void Rune. This will keep an enemy caster slowed and silenced for a long time. And if you pull this off, you might just hear his keyboard fly through his window. Void Fire Fire is good against tanky, immobile casters such as Necromancer or Beguiler that you don't really need the slow from Ice Rune to keep them in distance. And Ice Void Ice is great against players that you know are instinctively going to run away. It'll silence them and slow them for a long time, preventing their escape. Fire 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 is probably the most popular rune set, and it's the best against warriors because it does so much damage. You start with 3 fire runes, and after the first one gets applied, you instantly apply another one, meaning you still have 3 fire runes. Then after all 3 of those fire runes get used up, fire runes probably back off cooldown so you can apply a 4th one. Now there are also some combos that you don't want to use. Pretty much any combo that stacks runes other than fire runes is bad, bad, bad. And this is because rune effects do not stack. If I have multiple void runes on my sword, the first one will silence for the 1.5 seconds like normal, and the second will simply refresh the duration, not add to it. This also applies to toxic and ice runes, which is why you want to use a different type of rune as your filler, such as void, ice, void. The ice rune in the middle means it so that when your second void is applied, the first silence is already over, meaning that you're not shooting yourself in the foot, and instead you're maximizing the effectiveness of your silences and slows. When playing as Runeblade against casters, your primary targets, your key thing is to stay on top of them. Use Blink to close the distance and start with a Void Ice Void. This should keep them on their toes and make sure that they can't really cast and retaliate you for a good amount of time. Keep auto-attacking them and remember that Runeblade have a hard time against kiters, so you're going to want to stay on top of them to your best ability. This is what Blink is for. Like any slightly immobile melee class against a ranged class, you want to keep on top of them, keep running at them, and remember that if they turn to attack you and deal damage, their slowing down means you can close the gap. If you expect periods of heavy damage, turn on Devour Magic, and make sure to keep Rune Wound on them as much as you can. If they go in for a critical disable like an Entangle or a Slow, make sure to Arcane Transfer it back into their face. This will turn the tables into your favor and allow you to catch up with them and get some auto attacks off. Fighting against melee classes is beyond simple. You're going to start with as many fire runes as you can shove onto your sword, and apply as many runes as you can onto your sword as fast as you can. Literally, if a rune comes off cooldown, you want to apply it to your sword. Your cooldowns don't really matter because they're mostly physical damage anyways, although Arcane Transfer can be useful. And Blink is great to close the gap if they happen to run away from you. So if you're looking for a duelist class that's extremely good in 1v1 situation, or you just want to have some of the highest burst damage in the game, or you just feel like being a rogue that uses magic, go for the Runeblade. They're a pretty fun class. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Hero Showcase. This is Arl, signing off.